Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Search Podcast. I'm Elliot Manning. I've got a special guest with me today, someone I've known for many, many years, who actually interviewed me I think it was about 10 or so years ago. It's Marc Cohen. Marc is based out in, looks very sunny, he's got a good town on him in Los Angeles. But Marc, if you want to introduce yourself and who you are, where you are, and what you've been doing.
Thank you. My name is Marc Cohen, as Elliot said. I am based in Los Angeles, California. 12 years ago, I founded Consol Partners, or co-founded Consol Partners, which is a tech recruitment firm. We had good success, expanded into Austin, Boston, obviously Los Angeles. We had a main office in London and a presence in Germany and Middle East as well.
So you came from a background of recruitment anyway. Previously, you started off in it. I've looked on your LinkedIn, early 2000s. So you've done it for some time. What made you want to start your own firm, first of all? And I know you had a business partner that did it with you, but you kind of just started just yourselves and start from scratch. But you can hopefully tell us a little bit more.
Yes, I was actually working in Los Angeles as a recruitment consultant, specifically doing video game consulting. So billing well, life going well, hit a point in my late 20s that I figured I need to set myself up for the future, and I'm not going to do that by working for others.
Yeah.
So I was always open and started to put together a business plan. Yeah. And then in the London office, so I was working Los Angeles office of a company. In the London office was an individual called Graham Hubert, the director. We were super close, had a conversation about starting up. And I made the move back from Los Angeles, which was a tough one for me.
Yeah.
I moved back from Los Angeles to London, and we set up Consol. And that was a big thing, actually, just touching on that notion of doing it with a partner.
Yeah.
I talk to many individuals now, and it can be lonely at the top.
Yeah.
And that was something that was massive for us, is just having each other, we're still close to this day, just having each other to bounce ideas off, to vent to talk about, to actually go through this with you. And I think that's something that was really helpful throughout that time.
Yeah, I mean, I speak to a lot of business owners and they end up having to bring in some sort of like NED at some point, which is great because, you always need someone around you to bounce ideas off of. And even if it's not even that, it's just when you're on your way home from work to have a moan and,
Yes.
chit chat about the day. And, it's so helpful, to have, as a business owner. I mean, from then on, did you both kind of have a plan of where you wanted to be in 10 years, 5 years? Did you have an end goal of what you wanted to achieve?
Yeah, it's an interesting one when we look back now, because we actually talk about this. So when we put together our business plan, it was really simple. We're building a business to exit.
Yeah.
So the first 2 years, Graham and I didn't take any salary, nothing.
Wow. Yeah.
Just everything was reinvested back in the business, and then continued that momentum. Our goal was to build something that would be attractive to a buyer. And it's interesting because when we were first setting up the business, that was some of the advice that we got. You need to decide now what you're doing, because every decision you're going to make over the next few years has got to be towards that end goal.
Yeah.
So then when we built the business, obviously expanded it, we hit 10 million pretty quickly. When I left, we were doing over 30 million. And ultimately, we were able to go out to market. We had numerous offers for investment or acquisition, and then picked the right partner. But looking back now, it's funny because we just simply executed our plan. So we didn't really realize, only now you think, okay, we're so lucky because a lot of people executed their plan and didn't get the same end result.
Yeah.
But yeah, we always had a plan to build it, to exit it. We always thought about something north of, we wanted to build the business to be a valuation of, close to 15, 20 million, which is what we achieved.
Amazing. Did you find that you were very hands-on throughout the time in the business? Did you kind of have a point where you thought, I need to back off and stop being relied upon in this business and, really show that whoever's coming in long-term, they can see that?
Really interesting. So you're right on, businesses have different layers. So growing from 0 to 15 or 0 to 20 was really simple because it could rely on the billings of Graham and I, could rely on our ability as recruiters. Then from you get to sort of 20 to 35 is slightly different because you've got to appoint team leaders, and that's where you do have to take a step back. I see many businesses struggle with that concept where funders, at that point, you can't be billing if you want to build a big business. You can't be doing that. Whilst you can do a little bit of BD and bring some clients in, you need to be a lot more strategic.
Yeah.
So really from that 20 to 35, we stood back. And then when you get to 35, 40 people, you've got a very different business.
Yeah.
You're then starting to become a little bit more of an executive within a business. And then it's about appointing stuff like CFO, an operations director. The business starts to take another leap. You get to 80 to 100 people, then that's when you are really in a board role. And it's actually a bit of a shame because I really, really enjoyed the building phase. Like, it was so good. Even when I moved back out to LA and we built up the US presence, it was really interesting, exciting, dynamic, hands-on. I always say, unfortunately, when you get to the size where you're so big, the success is great.
Yeah.
But typically, you're just hearing about the challenges. If there's a knock on the door, I know it's rarely somebody saying, "Oh, guess what? We've just done 5 deals that you didn't know about." It's a case of, we've got a challenge, or dealing with a lot of firefighting. So it's interesting because, yes, always hands-on, never really, when I say hands-on, always involved day-to-day with the business, always involved with the team, open door policy. But yeah, the role does change slightly as the year progressed.
Fine. And could I just ask about, like, who, how did this come about for you? You know, who taught you, who showed you the way to do this? You know, did you go to, to do any studying for it? Did you have mentors that you would go to?
That's an excellent question. So the basics, let's say the recruitment piece, obviously I learned that as a hands-on recruitment consultant, as a big biller. And that's one of the things I talked to the team about, the guys. I said, 95% of my conversations with you are going to be recruitment, objection handling, headhunting, winning clients, client engagement, etc. So that's a big thing to start with, the fact that I believe if you're going to run a business, you need to know recruitment inside out. So that part was probably the easy part. The part that you have to learn is operations, finance, P&L. And there's actually a threefold answer to that. Step one is you experience it. You talk to advisors, you start to learn that yourself. You start to, when you're talking to other companies and you're vetting them, you start to understand. Some people put a big emphasis on, like, for example, we've met one individual who's very inspirational, just kept talking to us about the exit goal. That stuck with us. Now, prior to that, that wasn't something that we knew, but so you're picking up nuggets as you go along. And then the third component is we always did have a big emphasis on outside advice. So throughout the life cycle of the business, we had an investor from day one. It was a minority investor, somebody I'd trusted and worked with for a long time, individual called Matt Ellis. So he worked with us from, business plan stage, so was able to give us advice. And then throughout the period, we got advice from different people. We got them onto the board for like a 1-year period, got lots of good advice, input from them, and moved on to someone else. So we always had a lot of advisors, because a lot of the time they'd be able to give us answers that we didn't have.
Amazing. Fine. And kind of last sort of note to touch on Consol as a business itself. How did you build the leadership team? How did you find the right leaders? How did you know that they were going to be good leaders and that could take over, the reins from yourself?
Yeah. So step one is we believe heavily in a big grooming policy, massive on training.
Yeah.
So for us, our philosophy was always going to be to try to promote from within. And we were fortunate when the economy changed. We set up in 2008. When the economy changed in 2010, there was some really good, talented people on the marketplace. And in fact, we got sort of 3 out of our 4 directors in that 2010 period, where we were able to hire senior or team leader level individuals, and then able to groom them and grow them through the business.
Yeah.
And that was also a big help with the story that we're promoting. The story is hiring individuals who might not have much experience or limited recruitment experience, and them seeing that other people in the business grew to team leader, to manager, to director. Some of those became shareholders. So it really built that continuity in the business, and many people are still there today, 10 years plus experience. So that sort of career path was a really good one for us, a really positive story. But it is hard. It's really hard developing that. So we had to consistently work with those individuals. We gave them internal training, external training. So we did a lot around it, and they were good guys that really stepped up. I mean, one of the people was our first hire, still there to this day, 12 years later.
Yeah.
Shareholder in the business. So yes, that was a good. The leadership team
What's the biggest thing you learned about yourself in this whole journey that you've had to basically where you are right now, which you've, the business has moved on, you've done your bit, what's the biggest thing you learned about yourself?
It's a tough question, that. I'll say one thing, which is quite a funny one, which is there's this notion that, I don't know, but I'll talk for myself rather than for everyone,
Yeah, of course.
But the notion that in life, I always felt, look, I'm chasing becoming a millionaire. I'm chasing this end goal. And then I remember when Graham and I, literally the day that we signed the deal, we looked around and said, this is great, because now we can almost change everything. From today, we're going to be different people. We both looked at each other and said that, achieved the big goal. But in reality, your personality is your personality. Who you are, it doesn't sort of ultimately change overnight. And so that's something that I learned about myself. That I'm going to be in control of my own goals, happiness, whatever else I want. The money's great, but actually when I achieved that goal, it didn't necessarily have the impact. And if I said that to you, if I said, yeah, I'm going to give you a check for X millions, you would think, yeah, it would change. From day one, my mindset would change. Actually, yeah. Me and Graham didn't find our mindset change. As much as we thought it would,
yeah,
it didn't per se. Like, I was still there grafting, we were still there concerned by things. Right now, I'm as you know, I'm doing a lot of investments, so I'm still concerned about money and where the next thing's coming from. So that sort of element doesn't change. There is one interesting thing to touch on though, which is, I remember in 2010, the business is 3 years old, and probably had about 30 people at that stage.
Yeah.
And our two biggest billers, number 1 and 2, one of them who we hired from day one, left the business at the same time to start up their own business.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, oh my God, this is so bad. This is so bad. It could be the end of Consol. And literally going home that night, not being able to sleep. And then, so we took advice. What do we do in this situation? People are saying, well, you're going to take a hit. Business is going to take a hit. You probably need to cut back some staff and etc. And Graham and I just weren't comfortable with that at all. Really weren't. And we were sitting there thinking, just for whatever reason, I'm not believing the advice that other people are giving me. I'm not buying into it.
Yeah.
And so Graham and I had a conversation. So if we've got to make decisions, we've got to make decisions that we believe, that we genuinely think are right. And I'd rather make a mistake, i.e. the business goes down, through a decision that we made, rather than we listen to advice that we didn't believe in.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So on that basis, we turned around. So we're not going to lay anyone off. In fact, the two biggest billers are still in the business, Graham and I. We literally, the day they left, jumped on the phone, started generating loads of clients, loads of business. With other people in Consol really stepped up. Suddenly, 2010 was a record year for us.
Amazing. Yeah.
What it shows though is a couple of things. First of all, we sometimes try and predict the future, i.e. something bad happens, and that's going to be a case of, oh my God, we can't hit our goal.
Start thinking the worst, right? And then naturally.
And that isn't necessarily, it might work out that way, it might not.
Yeah.
You can't start thinking about it then. So that was actually a really good lesson for me, not trying to predict the future. And then the other thing is, and I still hold this today, taking control of my own decisions.
Yeah.
In that instance, it was a joint decision. But really driving that, so that if I make a mistake, I can handle it if it's my mistake. It's so hard to handle it when somebody else makes a mistake on your behalf and give you advice that you didn't buy into. So make your own decisions is something that I would definitely point out to people.
I know I said that was the last question on this sort of subject before, but I've got to ask you one thing. Is there an element of do you miss it? Do you miss the business that you built and created? Like it's your baby, you built that function. Is there an element where you sort of think, what?
Yeah, never an element of that notion of, it'd be good to go. I wish I was still running the business. No,
yeah, of course.
I think that if you think about you're running a marathon, and people who have done a lot of training, like, obviously you finish the marathon, you don't necessarily want to run a marathon again.
No.
But then after a period of time, you start thinking, I could do one more. I could do some training and stuff.
Been there, done that. Yep.
Truth is, for me, I miss the conversations. I miss the people part, particularly in this COVID era. I miss that. I miss the people probably more, and just going in there and go. And some of those might be bantery conversations. Some of those might be big business conversations. I probably miss that more than per se running a big company day to day, the people who you get attached to.
Yeah, that's it. That's what I've spoken to other people, and they say exactly the same thing. It's who you've been around the majority of the time, and being around that kind of environment, is what you miss the most. So tell me,
because with the guys moving out, we moved out a lot of guys from England, and you can imagine that there's a small. I am super close with them, so you start to miss that aspect, and they're guys in America for me. So I suddenly cut off my British supply chain.
Yep.
Yeah.
Fine. Marc, tell me something. So right now you've moved into a new venture, obviously keeping yourself busy. You and I have spoken about this a few times, but tell, those listening, what you're up to now. What have you decided to put your teeth into to keep yourself occupied for the minute?
Yeah. So truth is, I don't know. So I'm doing a little bit of everything. Yeah. So I'm definitely looking at getting into some investments, doing stock market courses and learning all about that, which is so interesting. Good and big into real estate. But really now I'm starting to think about what I can do on the recruiting side to add value. So I'm considering consulting for some businesses as a non-exec advisor, or board advisor, and doing like executive coaching. So I'm quite fortunate. I've got a background in training. I did a lot of training previously. So I've got a good understanding of sales philosophy, psychology, linking that all together. So hopefully I'm going to start thinking about more helping some businesses grow and build, and especially businesses that are looking to expand internationally, because that's where we've got a really big focus.
Yeah, there's so many businesses that I know of, and obviously, that we've spoken about in the past, that are, whether they're looking to expand out into the US and they don't know what they're doing as such, someone like you who's been there, done it, proven to actually be successful with it is going to be quite key. So, but also at the same time is that there's businesses out in the US, just in particular, that, we've been dealing with recently, that are, in a position where they could do with the advice that you had throughout your career of Consol, that advised you and showed you the right direction. And I think, again, I reiterate this, I think people need that a hell of a lot. And I think if they need and want to create a business where it is successful and it has potentially that global presence, you can't do it alone, and if you think you can, then go for it, try it, learn from the mistakes. But if you want to avoid some of them, then I guess, that's where you can be really handy to them.
Yeah, I firmly believe it. We did it throughout our time at Consol. That advice is invaluable. You only need little nuggets to change your whole business, and particularly expanding from or going into a new territory, because you think you might know it. We thought we knew it, and I'd actually worked here previously, and I learned some things very, very quickly in the first year to think, we might have set that up a little bit differently. So there's knowledge in around location. So and it is tough. The US market's a really strong, hot market. Even in these COVID times, it's not taking the same hit as maybe some other regions. But in saying that, you got to get it right, especially if you're managing remotely nowadays.
Fine. And do you have, I asked someone this recently, and said to them, like, where's the hot locations in the US? Is there anywhere, without giving too much away, because obviously we want them to come to you to get more of the advice with, without it being too freely on the table, I suppose. But where's the hot locations in the US? Where would you, if you could give someone one bit of advice and they were thinking about that global expansion, what would you suggest to them? Or is it depending on their market?
It does depend on market. You're dead right on that, whether that be pharma or tech, life sciences, engineering. For example, if you're doing oil and gas, you've got to be in Texas. Engineering, you've got to be in Texas. So Texas is a good place because it's got a lower cost of living, which makes it a little bit more reasonable for some of the UK people coming over. Taxes are a lot more efficient, and you can build a scalable business there. So Texas is a really good location. California is a really tough location. The fact that we cracked California, or did very well in California, was a big reason for our appeal. But the truth is, California's got high taxes, really strong labour laws that favour employees. It's a lot further from England, really expensive cost of living, which then puts people under pressure to bill straight away. So whilst it works for us, it isn't the obvious go-to area. There are other areas, like I'd say Texas being a big one. I like Colorado. Denver's got a really big tech scene, for example, if you're into the tech piece. So absolutely getting locations key. Getting your legals right is key, because America is a litigious country. So you need to have your compliance dead right. And then just really important is just having the right packages out here. For example, the US is a high base, low commission market. we came out here with a low base, high commission model.
Yeah.
That's a challenge, because whilst it was really good for retaining people because they're billing and they're earning better commission they can get elsewhere, when you're hiring people, it's really hard because obviously you're paying low bases compared to those paying high bases.
Of course.
So there's some really big things to be aware of moving out here, but the market is hot. And the bigger thing is, it depends where it sits in an exit strategy for people. For us, we had this vision of exiting a serious business. The number one thing is you need to prove your concept outside of one office. Like, okay, great, you've got 100 people in London, but what the buying company wants to see is that when we blow this up and triple the size of your business, we want to know that that model that you've put in place still works in America, still works in Europe.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's fundamental for people to prove that even if they've got a really good business in one location in the UK, if they can prove that their model's scalable and i.e. a massive in exit terms.
Yeah. I don't think a lot of businesses, and I know this because I talk to a lot of them, they go to the US with a view of, that exit plan strategy. I think they do it because it's kind of a trend as such. And I think that they don't really think it through. And what you've just mentioned about these locations, I mean, I didn't know half of that, in terms of, from an, a recruitment perspective of, where to be. So that's why I think that, someone talking to people that have been there and done it is just going to be just, invaluable information, I suppose, that they can't get anywhere else.
But the big thing is, if you think about what we were just talking about here, is what's the goal? And that's the number one thing when I'm talking to any individuals almost, I go back to that piece of what you're trying to, I want to build a business. For what though? To exit it, to put money in your back pocket, lifestyle business, what is it you're trying to achieve? Because everything needs to trickle back from there. And I agree with you. I've seen some people move out. They moved out to Los Angeles, for example, and I've been a little bit baffled as to why, because I don't know if that's going to help them achieve their goal of what they want to do long term. So really, that's got to be on your mind. What do you want to do? And if you don't know, for example, I'm speaking to one company, and they're not sure whether they want to move into. We want to blow it up and exit it, or we want a lifestyle business. No problem. You don't have to be sure. But then you're making big decisions if you start opening up offices in another country without knowing that yet.
How's someone going to know, though, that at this point, whether they've got that kind of lifestyle business and that's where they've gone toward or moved towards without realizing it, or they need to actually, or they're at that point where it could be and should be a, a bigger sort of entity or bigger enterprise?
Yeah, good question. So a lot of people start initially without knowing, and so they'll build a lifestyle business. And that will work for them to a certain extent because they're earning good money, might be earning in pounds, 100, 200,000 pounds a year. They're still building a business, maybe. And they come a tipping point where they think, you know what, I can't do this for 20 years. I need to do something different. And that's where it gets interesting. I think people start to realize that there is a chance to do something different, or business is going well, or how are they going to get out of this day to day? I'm just recruiting. And that's when they need to take a step back and come up with a serious plan. So some businesses have been going as a lifestyle business for 4 or 5 years, no problem. And then if they start to feel the need to increase their business or to really build a business, great chance then to get an advisor and to understand what you really want to do.
Yep.
It is tough though, because it requires an element of risk, hiring people at a time when maybe you'll be earning less money.
Yep.
So because you're pumping that money back into the business, obviously it could go to the extent where you don't earn much money at all for the next X years. And that's something that people need to factor in. So some people have got a newborn child at home.
Yep.
It's not easy for them to say, yeah, I can cut my income. Graham and I were fortunate on something, in the sense that, first of all, we earned a lot of money as consultants, and I'd always sort of banked money. So I had a little bit of money in the bank. And because we launched the business day one with the mindset we're going to build it, we sort of knew where we stood for the first 1 to 2 years. So we didn't actually get income coming in where you feel comfortable with. And, at year 5, well, you're earning 300,000 a year. If somebody had said then at that stage, oh, right, you now need to earn 0 for the next couple of years, it might have been a little bit harder psychologically, because you've started to deploy some of that money.
Yeah.
Whereas when we first started, we just sort of hunkered down. It was quite funny to think that our consultants were earning more money than us. Yep. We had this business with like 20 people, and people are like, oh, you guys are doing so well. I'm looking at them thinking, if only you knew. I'm not making any money. I've got like nothing right now. So yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest things I see in recruitment a lot, is that they don't see that side of it. And this is something that a lot of business owners in this industry experience. But they've all kind of said the same thing, was literally what you've just said, they don't, if only you knew, kind of thing. But look, it's the end goal, isn't it? At the end of the day, that's what we're all working towards. And, that's going to be the big difference, at the end of it.
Yeah, it is. And, just some people, I'd say it'd be interesting to see, how do you differentiate yourself? What do you do? So at Consol, for example, we always had a big value on future tech.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is we'd analyze the market and think about what tech's going to be big in a few years' time. So we were doing AI, for example, 8 years ago, before it became this massive buzzword it is today. We've been doing autonomous driving and blockchain infrastructure, again, for several years. And so being ahead of the trends in your sector are critical, because that's where the growth is. And then having an internal policy, as very early on, was we struggled to find good talent. We really did. We always did. This is why you add so much value to your clients.
Yeah.
We struggled to find good talent. And therefore, we decided at the pace that we were going to grow at, with my training background, we're going to double down and put heavy investment into training.
Yeah.
So we would constantly train people.
Fine.
So the reason I say that is just that some of your companies you're working with start to think about how they're going to differentiate, what you're going to do, what's your strategy. Because if you're doing the same thing you did at your previous company, the same old shit, you're going to get the same old results.
100%. Couldn't agree more. On a final note, Marc, if you could give any recruiters advice that are looking to sort of start their own business now and get to that point of, look, I've been a very successful big biller, $500,000, $1 million a year. It's time I do it myself. Is there any kind of particular advice you would give them to think about, having been there, done it, in worn a t-shirt now?
I'm going to pass on the best advice that I got.
Go on.
So I was very fortunate. When I was a kid, I played a bit of golf, and I met somebody who was one of the richest guys in Britain. This guy had a lot of money, and I built up a relationship with him just playing golf, like nothing. Got to the stage I went to university. After university, I said to him, "Hey, can I come and see you? I'd love to go play around the golf." Let's play around the golf. And by the way, this guy was like, he hated his business. He didn't want to have anything to do with board meetings. All he wanted to do was be on the golf course, and He just almost like. He just says, he used to tell me, everyone wants something from me. I just want to play golf. So at 21, I went to him and I said to him, look, I want you to give me one piece of advice, just one bit of advice. And I'm going to take that advice. And first of all, he said to me, I'm so glad, because I thought you were going to ask me for money. But then he said, the one bit of advice is take the risk. And he said, when he looked back, he was 30, he had a child, and he actually got into really high-end real estate. He took a massive risk, and that risk propelled him to hundreds and hundreds of millions. And he said he compared that to his friends, and he asked his friends, do you want to come in with me? And everyone said no. And they stood by and watched him build this empire. And number one thing, he always just said, at some stage, you're going to know, and you need to take the risk. And therefore, I always heard, when you asked me earlier, hey, how did you know you were going to start up? I knew at 21. After that conversation, at some stage, I'm going to take the risk. I didn't know when it would be. There was a level of maturity that I had to get to.
Yeah.
I had fun in LA in my 20s, and it got to late 20s. I realized, okay, I'm probably mature enough now to do something else.
Yeah.
But yeah, number one thing I'd say to anyone is you've got to take the risk. Nothing's going to be given to you.
Amazing. Fantastic. Marc, I think this has been unbelievable. Really interesting and really, really insightful. I can't wait to get this out. I think that what I'll do is, I'll put everything on here in terms of what you've mentioned, your contact details as well, so people can reach out to you directly. If anyone has any questions to ask, obviously they can go to you and, connect with you. If they want to go through me and ask me to introduce you, absolutely no problem at all. But Marc, I know you're a really busy guy, and trying to, I suppose, find the next big investments for yourself now. So I'll leave you to do that. And again, really appreciate it. Thank you very much for, jumping on the podcast with me.
And just one final point, Elliot, I must say, for you and I met 10 years ago. We stayed in contact throughout that time, and think you've proven yourself a very smart recruiter, very honest individual throughout that time. I've never heard someone say a negative word about you. I'm sure there are people out there.
I'm sure there's a few.
But yeah, so keep up the good work. It's really good what you're doing out there, mate. So I'm proud of you in that sense. Keep it up.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much, Mark. That means a lot, especially come from, yourself and what you've achieved as well. But generally, lovely guy. And I really, really do think that the next big thing you're going to, is going to be just around the corner very soon. But we'll talk soon, Mark, I'm sure. And thank you very much.
Thanks, mate. Take care.
Take care.